The morning sun cast golden rays across Westminster Abbey as thousands of people lined the streets of London. Catherine adjusted her stunning silver gown one final time, her hands trembling slightly as she gazed out the window of the royal carriage. Today would mark the most significant moment in her life since becoming a member of the royal family. The weight of the ancient crown jewels seemed to press upon her shoulders even before she wore them. William reached across and gently squeezed her hand, offering a reassuring smile that had comforted her through countless public appearances over the years. His own ceremonial uniform, adorned with medals and royal insignia, made him appear every inch the future king he was destined to become. The carriage wheels clicked rhythmically against the cobblestones as they approached the Abbey, where centuries of British monarchs had been crowned before them. Outside, the crowd's excitement was building to a fever pitch. People had camped overnight, some traveling from distant corners of the Commonwealth just to witness this historic moment. Union Jack. Flags fluttered in the gentle breeze, while photographers positioned themselves for the perfect shot. The atmosphere was electric with anticipation as security personnel made final checks along the procession route. Catherine's mind wandered to her children, who would soon witness their parents stepping into roles that would shape their own futures forever. Responsibility felt overwhelming. Yet she drew strength from the support of the British people visible through the carriage windows. Their cheers and waves reminded her that this moment belonged not just to her and William, but to an entire nation ready to embrace a new chapter in their royal history. The Abbey bells began their ancient song, echoing across the city and announcing to the world that something extraordinary was about to unfold. William straightened his shoulders, knowing that in moments they would step from the carriage and begin their walk toward destiny. The future of the monarchy rested in their hands, and they were ready to accept that sacred trust as their carriage slowed to approach the Abbey entrance. Catherine took a deep breath and prepared herself for the moment that would transform them from the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge into something far greater. The crowd's roar grew louder, and she could feel the energy of history itself pulsing through the air around them. The carriage door opened with a soft click, and William stepped out first, extending his hand to help Catherine descend. The moment her silver heels touched the red carpet, a thunderous cheer erupted from the assembled crowd. Camera flashes created a constellation of light as photographers captured every angle of their arrival. Catherine's dress, designed by the same fashion house that created her wedding gown, sparkled magnificently in the morning sunlight. Her diamond tiara, borrowed from the Queen's personal collection, caught the light as she turned to acknowledge the crowd. William's ceremonial sword gleamed at his side as he waved to the thousands of well-wishers pressed against the barriers. Children held handmade signs declaring their love for the royal couple, while elderly spectators wiped tears from their eyes at witnessing such a momentous occasion. The couple paused at the Abbey steps, allowing the photographers and television cameras to capture the historic scene. Catherine's bouquet of white roses and lily of the valley trembled slightly in her hands, betraying the nervousness she fought to conceal behind her radiant smile. William placed a protective hand on the small of her back, a gesture that spoke volumes about their partnership and mutual support. Archbishop of Canterbury stood waiting at the entrance, his ceremonial robes flowing in the gentle breeze. Behind him, the Abbey's ancient stones seemed to whisper the stories of countless coronations that had taken place within those hallowed walls. The Gothic architecture provided a majestic backdrop for this modern fairy tale unfolding before the eyes of the world. Security officers maintained their positions while trying to remain invisible to the cameras. Every detail had been planned and rehearsed countless times. Yet the spontaneous emotion of the moment could not be choreographed. Catherine looked up at William, their eyes meeting in a silent exchange of love and determination, as they both understood that once they crossed the threshold of the Abbey, their lives would be forever changed. The crowd's enthusiasm showed no signs of diminishing as the couple prepared to enter the sacred space. Royal guards stood at attention, while members of Parliament and foreign dignitaries waited inside. The weight of tradition and the promise of the future seemed to converge in this single, perfect moment as William and Catherine prepared to take their next steps toward the altar. As William and Catherine crossed the threshold into Westminster Abbey, The magnificent organ began playing the traditional processional hymn. The ancient stones of the abbey seemed to embrace them as they entered the sacred space where kings and queens had been crowned for nearly 1,000 years. The interior was breathtaking, with every pew filled with distinguished guests from around the world who had come to witness this historic ceremony. Catherine's train flowed behind her like liquid silver as she walked down the aisle, her posture perfect despite the overwhelming grandeur surrounding her. The stained glass windows cast colorful patterns across the stone floor, creating a pathway of light that seemed to guide their steps toward the altar. William walked beside her with the confidence of a man born to this moment, yet his gentle glances toward his wife revealed the tender humanity beneath his royal bearing. Their children, Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis, watched from the front pew with barely contained excitement. George, understanding the significance of the day, sat with remarkable composure for a young boy, while Charlotte whispered quietly to her younger brother. The sight of their children witnessing this historic moment brought tears to Catherine's eyes. Though she maintained her composed expression for the watching world, members of European royal families filled the distinguished guest section, their own crowns and tiaras, creating a glittering display of centuries-old tradition. Prime ministers, presidents, and world leaders had traveled from every continent to witness the coronation. Understanding that they were participating in a moment that would be remembered for generations to come, the Archbishop of Canterbury's voice echoed through the abbey as he began the ancient ceremony that would transform William and Catherine forever. Each word carried the weight of history, connecting them to an unbroken chain of monarchs, stretching back through the centuries. The solemnity of the moment was palpable as everyone present understood they were witnessing the continuation of one of the world's oldest institutions. Catherine's heart raced as she prepared to take the sacred oaths that would bind her to a lifetime of service to the British people and the Commonwealth. The crown jewels gleamed on their velvet cushions nearby, waiting to be placed upon their heads in the culmination of this extraordinary ceremony. She drew strength from William's presence beside her and from the knowledge that they would face the future together, just as they had faced every challenge since their university days. The moment arrived when William and Catherine knelt before the altar, their heads bowed in reverence as the Archbishop of Canterbury prepared to perform the most sacred part of the ceremony. The abbey fell into complete silence, with only a soft whisper of fabric and the distant sound of the crowd outside, breaking the profound quiet. Catherine's hands were folded in prayer, her diamond engagement ring catching the light from the ancient chandeliers above. The Archbishop lifted the St. Edward's crown, the same crown that had been used in coronations for over 3 centuries. Its gold surface gleamed with precious stones that had witnessed the hopes and fears of countless monarchs throughout British history. William's expression was serene, yet deeply moved, as the weight of kingship was about to be literally placed upon his shoulders. When the crown touched William's head, a collective gasp arose from the assembled guests, followed by a moment of profound silence that seemed to stretch across time itself. Catherine watched with tears streaming down her cheeks, overwhelmed by the magnitude of witnessing her husband transformed into the King of England before her very eyes. The ancient words of the ceremony seemed to resonate through the very stones of the abbey. Then came Catherine's turn to receive her crown, a moment she had dreamed about and feared in equal measure. As she knelt before the Archbishop, her mind filled with thoughts of all the queens who had knelt in this same spot throughout history. The Queen Consort's crown, adorned with the famous Cullinan diamonds, was lifted high above her head as the Archbishop spoke the words that would make her Queen Catherine. The weight of the crown upon her head felt both heavy and somehow natural, as if she had been born for this moment. When she rose and turned to face the congregation, the sight that greeted her was overwhelming. Every person in the abbey was standing, their faces filled with emotion as they witnessed the birth of a new era in British history. William took her hand as they stood together, newly crowned king and queen, their eyes meeting in a moment of private communication amidst the public spectacle. The organ music swelled to fill every corner of the ancient building, and outside, the bells of London began their celebratory peal. They had crossed the threshold from their former lives into something entirely new, bound together not only by loved but by their shared destiny to serve their people with dignity and grace. As the newly crowned King William and Queen Catherine processed back down the aisle of Westminster Abbey, the magnitude of what had just occurred began to settle upon them. The same aisle they had walked as Duke and Duchess now witnessed their return as monarchs, their steps measured and regal, despite the emotional turmoil both felt within their hearts. The ancient crowns upon their heads seemed to connect them directly to centuries of British history. The congregation remained standing as they passed, many dabbing at their eyes with handkerchiefs as they witnessed this transformational moment. Foreign dignitaries bowed their heads respectfully, while Commonwealth representatives beamed with pride at seeing their new sovereign. Catherine's training in royal protocol served her well as she maintained perfect posture despite the weight of her elaborate crown and the emotions threatening to overwhelm her composure. Their children watched with wide eyes as their parents walked past, now transformed into the king and queen they would one day serve and eventually succeed. Prince George's serious expression showed his growing understanding of the family legacy he would inherit. While Princess Charlotte waved excitedly at her mother, little Prince Louis clapped his hands together, delighted by the pageantry even if he couldn't fully grasp its significance as they approached the abbey doors. The sound of the cheering crowd outside grew louder, penetrating even the thick stone walls of the ancient building. William squeezed Catherine's hand gently, a private gesture of reassurance that reminded her they would face this new chapter of their lives together. Just as they had faced every challenge since their courtship began at university, the doors of Westminster Abbey swung open, revealing the sea of humanity that had gathered to witness their emergence as the newly crowned monarchs. The roar that greeted them was deafening, a sound of pure joy and celebration that seemed to shake the very foundations of the historic building. Cameras flashed like lightning as photographers captured the first images of King William and Queen Catherine stepping into the sunlight. The Golden State coach waited to carry them back to Buckingham Palace, its ornate decorations gleaming in the afternoon sun. Royal guards stood at attention while the horses stamped their feet, sensing the excitement in the air. Catherine paused for a moment at the top of the Abbey steps, taking in the extraordinary sight of thousands of people celebrating this moment with them, their faces filled with hope for the future of the monarchy under their reign. King William helped Queen Catherine into the Golden State coach, her elaborate gown requiring careful arrangement to prevent any damage to the priceless fabric. As they settled into the plush velvet seats, both monarchs were struck by the surreal nature of their transformation. Just hours earlier, they had been the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge. Now they wore the crowns that made them the symbolic heads of not just Britain, but the entire Commonwealth. The coach began its slow journey through the streets of London, every window and rooftop along the route packed with cheering spectators. Children perched on their parents' shoulders waved miniature Union Jack flags, while elderly citizens wiped tears from their eyes at witnessing such a historic moment. The clip-clop of the horses' hooves on the pavement created a rhythmic soundtrack to their triumphant procession. Catherine gazed out at the faces in the crowd, many of whom had traveled from across the globe to be part of this celebration. Their expressions of joy and hope reminded her of the enormous responsibility she and William now carried. They were no longer just husband and wife, but the living symbols of British values and traditions that would guide the nation into the future. William observed the elaborate decorations that adorned every building along their route. Banners, flowers, and bunting created a festival atmosphere that transformed the familiar streets of London into something magical. The outpouring of public affection was both humbling and inspiring, reinforcing his determination to serve his people with the same dedication his grandmother had shown throughout her remarkable reign. As Buckingham Palace came into view, both new monarchs felt a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. The familiar facade of their future home looked different somehow, as if the building itself recognized their changed status. The balcony where they would soon appear to greet the nation awaited them, ready to host another iconic moment in royal history. The coach passed through the palace gates to thunderous applause from the assembled crowd in the forecourt. As they prepared to step down and begin their first official duties as king and queen, Catherine reached for William's hand one final time. Together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead, united by love, strengthened by tradition, supported by the unwavering loyalty of their people. Their coronation day had ended, but their reign had only just begun. It was filled with promise for a bright future under their leadership.